Welcome back. We've come a long way, and this is our last video working together to reassemble this transmission. This is Project 4L60E, Part 2, Lesson 10. Before we begin to finish the transmission, I want to let you know that all the parts and the kit used in the project are available at the transmissionbench.com store. The quality of the parts and even the packaging is the finest available anywhere. They're the same materials that I've used professionally for many years, and I think they're the best you can get. If this is your first transmission project, you'll not only love the organized individual sub-kits of the overhaul packages, but also how the cost of most parts is less than what you would pay at a big box store. When you get a chance, check it out. Now let's get back to the transmission and finish it up. In the last lesson, we set the valve body down over the alignment pins. We'll begin this last lesson by installing the 17 bolts of 4 different lengths which attach the valve body to the case. In order to place the correct bolt in each hole, we need to separate them into groups. Get the remaining small shank bolts and the dipstick limit bracket. You will not need these short bolts. I've arranged the bolts according to length and head size. The 3 bolts on the left, outlined in blue, are the only ones with 8mm heads. The 14 bolts on the right, outlined in red, have 10mm heads and are grouped into 3 different lengths. 1 9/16 of an inch, 2 inch, and 2 3/4 inch. This dipstick limit bracket will be fastened with a 1 9/16 inch bolt. Get the 3 longest 2 3/4 inch bolts with 10mm heads. Remove only this alignment pin and install the 3 bolts into these holes which go through the manifold pressure switch, finger tight. Get the 2 short 1 9/16 inch bolts and the bracket. Remove the other alignment pin. Depending on year, you may encounter one of 3 different styles of dipstick limit brackets. This type should be placed like so, not like this. If you bolt it down this way, it will interfere with the pan. Place the short bolts here and here, finger tight. The 3 unique bolts with 8mm heads go in next. They must be installed into these holes, here, here, and here. If you put them in any of the other holes in this area, they will protrude too far beyond the inner case and hit the drive shell, which will lock it down. Get the last 9 2-inch bolts. Install them into the remaining holes. Tighten finger tight. Use an inch-pounds torque wrench and tighten to 120 inch-pounds. Get the detent spring and 13mm headed bolt. Install it here. Torque to 200 inch-pounds. We'll need the filter and miscellaneous subkits again. Before reinstalling the wiring harness and TCC solenoid, use needle nose pliers to replace a filter in here. Twist and remove it. Get the new one. Place it in the solenoid housing and twist to lock it. Remove the O-ring. Get the same size new O-ring and put it on. Add some fluid. Install it into the TCC valve bore of the pump. There are two short 10mm headed bolts in the box. Install finger tight, then torque to 120 inch-pounds. Get the PWM solenoid. Replace the O-rings. Remove the clip, add fluid, and push it into the valve body. Replace the clip. Reconnect all of the connectors of the wiring harness. Install the filter next. There are 3 different type filters for the 4L60E depending on which style pan is being used. The 3 types are early shallow style, late deep style, and one for the Corvette. The 2004 model we are working on takes the late deep style filter like this one. Put fluid on the filter tube and the seal in the pump. Use a twisting motion while pushing it in. It should fit very tight. Place the pan gasket onto the case. Do not use any sealants. The gasket and pan rail should remain dry. Get the pan and clean it. Make sure to replace the flat magnet which goes here. Set it onto the case. Get the 16 pan bolts. Use a 13mm socket and ratchet and tighten snug. Finally, use a torque wrench and tighten to 120 inch-pounds. Tilt the case over. Get the servo assembly and snap ring. Separate it like this. Remove the O-rings from the cover and the inner housing. Then remove one Teflon seal from the fourth apply piston and set it next to it, and two from the second apply piston. Get the blue O-ring from the servo and pump subkit. Place it on the servo cover. Place the red O-ring onto the inner housing. Get a seal for the fourth apply piston. The rings we need for it and the second apply piston are made of a Teflon material with diagonally cut ends. In order to make it fit tight in its groove, roll it up like so. Then place it in the piston groove. Add some fluid and set it into the cover. The side with the tallest inner structure goes into the cover. These are the correct diameter for the second apply piston used in this transmission. Roll one up and install it here. Do the same with the other one here. Add fluid to the seals and the shaft. Put the inner housing onto the piston with these 3 pads facing away. Set them into the cover and 4th piston. Replace the return spring. Insert a medium-sized screwdriver into the shaft hole to make sure the band is positioned correctly. You should be able to feel the spring-like backlash of the band anchor. Apply fluid to the servo bore, including the chamfered area here. Set the return spring in like so. Then install the servo assembly. Push in while tapping with a hammer. Install the snap ring. Turn the transmission over. If the output shaft on the transmission model you are working on has a sleeve like this one, use a pick and remove the O-ring located here. Replace it with the one in the kit. Transmissions with this sleeve need a heavy bearing grease applied to the drive shaft yoke splines. Do not use transgel or transmission fluid. You do not have to lubricate 4-wheel drive and 2-wheel drive output shafts without this sleeve. If you are working on a 2-wheel drive model, get the extension housing. Remove the rear seal with a hammer and screwdriver by collapsing the metal clad. Drive the bushing out. Drive the new one in. Drive the new seal in. Install a new square cut O-ring from the overhaul kit. Get the 6 15mm headed bolts like these. Place the housing onto the case and install the bolts. Tighten with a large ratchet or use a foot-pounds torque wrench. Torque specification is 35 foot-pounds. The new vehicle speed sensor goes in next. Get it and the short 8mm headed bolt. Lubricate the O-ring and hole. Twist while pushing in. Install the bolt. If you are working on a 2005 or later model which uses this type of pump-to-case seal, install it now. Add fluid to the bonded rubber part and set it over the pump into its groove. The bell housing goes on next. Get the 8 Torx-headed bolts. Install the bolts dry. Do not use thread locker. It is not necessary. Tighten them with a 1/2-inch ratchet or torque wrench. The torque specification is 55 foot-pounds. Don't forget to reinstall this hose. All 4L60Es should have a hose attached to the vent tube and extending down to the pan. The quick connect type cooling line fittings have an internal O-ring which can leak from age. Use an 18mm socket to remove them. Get the new ones. Install them. The last part to install is the dipstick tube seal. Put a little transgel or fluid on the inner area to help when sliding the tube in. Push it into the case. That's it. We've come to the end of our project. The only other things I can think of to add now are a new torque converter and about 12 quarts of fluid. I'm James Williams, and it's been my pleasure to share with you what I know about this great transmission. Of all that you learn, I hope finding out that you can fix it yourself is the most rewarding. Once again, the pleasure's been all mine, and thanks for watching.